Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at medcommsnetworking.com and the associated websites, information services and resources for the global MedComms business, by which I'm talking people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, and medical publishing. You'll find lots of activities there, but also specifically lots of webinars going on. Every week we're running these webinars, and we've run a lot of webinars in the past. These are freely accessible to everybody, and it's great to have an international panel again today and an international audience. If you missed the webinars, you can always go to NetworkPharma TV and see the recordings. There's hundreds of recordings there now. So today in Open Access Week 2021, which is also Health Literacy Month, I'm absolutely delighted that we've got the team from Open Pharma here, who will introduce themselves in a moment. And we're going to talk about the Open Pharma regulation recommendations for plain language summaries, which I think is an important topic, and as I say, very topical to this week. So Adeline, I'm going to hand over to you. It's all yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. So we're here today to talk about equity and open access, the Open Pharma recommendations for plain language summaries of peer-reviewed medical journal publications. I'm Adeline Rosenberg. I'm a medical writer in the patient engagement and Open Pharma teams at PharmaGenesis, and I'm also a rare disease patient advocate. And I'll let my co-panelists introduce themselves.
I'm Marlon Thomas. I'm a person with a rare disease called Ataxia, and I run Ataxia and Me, a patient group.
I'm Kelly Soldavin. I'm a senior editor with Taylor and Francis, and one of the journals in my portfolio is Current Medical Research and Opinion, which is where the Open Pharma PLS recommendations have recently been published.
Hello, I'm Slavka Baronikova. I'm publication leader in Galapagos, the biotech company from Belgium, and I'm also basically member of a European Medical Writers Association, where we are often discussing this the plain language summaries. And as a part of the Open Pharma, I was extremely excited to work on this recommendations.
Thanks. So I'll just start us off briefly with what is Open Pharma, just for anyone who's not familiar. We're a multi-sponsor collaboration facilitated by PharmaGenesis, and we aim to drive positive change in the communication of pharma-sponsored research. You can see on the right here, we have our members and supporters for 2021, and we also have a position statement on open access that you can endorse on our website, which is openpharma.blog, and we're also around on Twitter and LinkedIn. So we're here today to talk about our recommendations for plain language summaries, or PLS. These are published in September 21 in Current Medical Research and Opinion. And this document was developed by the Open Pharma Accessibility Workstream after a really extensive review period with an expert roundtable and a focused public consultation. And this document essentially proposes a foundational standard for plain language summaries that can be shared in a way that is broad and understandable. So before we get stuck in, I just want to be really clear that we're talking about plain language summaries of publications, and that is a plain language summary that covers the scope of an associated manuscript and presents it in a jargon-free, more readable way. And we're not talking about regulatory trial results summaries, which are, of course, the EU mandated public disclosure of trial results, which cover one clinical trial and are highly regulated by the EU CTR. We won't go much further into that, but if you do have questions on the differences, we do have a crib sheet on our resources page on our website. But back to plain language summaries of publications and why we came up with our recommendations. Essentially, we needed a standard that considers multiple stakeholder perspectives, both one that outlines a minimum standard based on what we know is possible for those who are creating, sharing, funding, and hosting plain language summaries, so PLS that are cost effective and easy to produce, but also standards that ensure that PLS are fit for purpose and consider end user needs. And that also means making sure they're discoverable within the systems we have, which is currently PubMed. So if we take a look at what the Open Pharma recommendations look like, they recommend that PLS are written for a broad and inclusive audience, so non-technical, non-specialist, time poor. This means writing for everyone who's engaging with medical research, which does include patients, but is not limited solely to patients. PLS should be easily understandable, unbiased, free of jargon. So that means using accessible and inclusive non-technical language that follows health literacy best practices. PLS should be text-based and concise, and this helps make sure that they're discoverable in systems such as PubMed. They should link to their source publication citation and any clinical trial identifiers that they're associated with. And this is especially important in case they're ever presented out of context of their source. They should, of course, be consistent with the same overall messages and conclusions of the scientific source. And they should be developed alongside the manuscript in the first place, meeting authorship criteria from the ICMJE. So usually this means having named authors take responsibility for approving content, but in some cases, single author approval may be sufficient. PLS should really ideally be reviewed by a non-expert and include non-expert input. This will help ensure that they're fit for purpose and meet their end user needs. And really crucially, they should be made available to read free of charge, because they're not doing anyone any good if they're hidden behind a paywall. And finally, plain language summaries should be tagged with appropriate metadata and keywords. So that means using plain language terms along with your mesh terms. So this should help make sure that they're discoverable and can actually be found by people who benefit from them. And before I turn over to the discussion, I just wanted to highlight that this isn't the only PLS initiative. There's a lot going on in the area. We have stuff coming from ISMAP and Vision Pharma. We have GVP4 coming soon, patient-focused medicines development. We have a lot of good work coming out of Future Science Group, and of course, European Medical Writers Association, which is meeting next week. So I'll now turn over to my co-panelists to share their perspectives.
I'll jump in and get us started. First of all, I'm very glad to be here today and very excited to be part of this discussion along with the Open Pharma team. As I said, current medical research and opinion, where these recommendations are published, is one of the journals that's in my portfolio at Taylor and Francis. And what is really nice about this is that recently, earlier this year, Taylor and Francis published our own guidelines for plain language summaries. And they tie in, are very complementary with the recommendations from the Open Pharma group. And I remember 3 years ago doing a webinar on plain language summaries. And one of the things that all of us on that discussion talked about is that there wasn't a lot of consensus yet about plain language summaries and their publication. And just now in 3 years, we're now reaching a point where we have a lot of consensus and agreement on what these plain language summaries should look like, how they should be published, and how we should be sharing them. So moving forward, now that we're starting to get that consensus on the publication and developing them, I think further initiatives, ones that Taylor and Francis are looking at, and other ones I know other publishers and the publishing industry in general, are how we measure metrics, how we measure their impact. So we all say that, well, plain language summaries are wonderful. I think we all agree on that, but we also need to be able to quantify that and show that with metrics. In addition, we want to train our peer reviewers, especially because a lot of times we may not have a patient peer reviewer on the journal that is peer reviewing a plain language summary. We want to make sure that our peer reviewers are trained and know how to evaluate them properly, since they are written differently than a research manuscript. And then in addition, after publication, I'm really pushing to have plain language summaries all published open access. Right now, at Taylor and Francis, all of them are freely accessible. They're in front of the paywall, whether or not the article itself is. But I think they should also be published under a CC BY license and be truly open access, so that they become very accessible to anyone looking for them. And also, in addition to that, we need to make them findable within our own search function. We're improving tagging of plain language summaries and terms that when you search for them, that they easily come up, that you're pulling up articles with a plain language summary, not just an article that has plain language summary in its title or talks about them. There's some discussion I hear still about doing a repository for plain language summaries as an industry. I think that would be wonderful. It would be really nice to be able to point people in one direction to where they can find all these plain language summaries together versus having to go. Right now we have PubMed, and thankfully most publishers are indexing their plain language summaries on PubMed, but still it can be a little bit of a challenge to find them. And I think to continue with the inclusivity, we need to make it very easy for a general lay audience to locate these so that they can have the most impact. So I will turn it over to the next person that would like to contribute.
Maybe I can link to it. Thank you. It's based, this is the journal and quite actually progressive publisher presentation of what we are doing at PLS is from really company perspective, and I'm not speaking only as a biotech type of company, but also from my previous life. It is very important for us that we are transparent, right, about the clinical research. And one of the part of the transparency is also that not only specialists can understand the publications. So when we were talking about these basic recommendations, as really the basic recommendations in our paper, it was about making it available not only via the publishing in the paper, but the idea was also that we would have that abstract in plain language published ideally on PubMed or any other publicly available database, right? Which basically, of course, you talk about open access there, which will be published in a paper, but we basically came with the recommendations that it will be, if it is part of the PubMed, right, then everyone who is searching in this type of directory, they can basically scroll down and see the plain language. And when I say anyone, it is really GPs, pharmacists, who are not specialists in the specific field. And then they decide, yes, I want to go to the paper or not. And I think I'm a bit slightly linking to one of the comments in the chat already, that yes, infographics is extremely useful, but those are I think the add-ons that you are talking also about to publish as open access as a in a sense almost enhancement to the paper, right? And that will be publicly and open access available. What we were discussing in our paper is really just the basics, just really basic recommendations in order to have it in each journal and plus PubMed ideally.
Yeah, it's Alan. Yeah, I think it's a great recommendation, especially as we're talking communication and ataxia affects the speech. So for me, it's a double whammy. Can I say we've got a similar procedure in some of the health board meetings that I attend, that we have an easy read summary of a huge amount of printed material to go through, and it's really welcomed by all the staff that are involved with that, because they can read the summary, plain language summary, before they get into the huge detail of the board meetings. So, a plain language summary to me is an improvement in quality of life for a lot of people with a health condition. And, not using jargon and abbreviations is a huge step forward, and that's ask. That is a huge task in medical documents.
Okay, Alan, sorry, I think we weren't sure whether you'd finished your comment, but thank you very much.
Sorry.
It's all right,
Yeah, communication.
That's okay. But if we're going to have to pass this around a little bit, so let's make it clear when we stop talking. Otherwise, we'll be sitting here being very respectful but very quiet. Adeline, do you want to come in at that stage? You've heard the comments from your different stakeholders. Talk a little bit more about it from your point of view.
Yeah, and just seeing some comments come in the Q&A box, so I think I might start pulling some of those through. We have one that's asking how much do patients actually use PubMed, and will patients find PLS that way? And our recommendations are, of course, that plain language summaries are not just for patients. There's a whole host of people who can stand to benefit from it, which does include patients, but really also includes as Slavka was saying, pharmacists, healthcare professionals, policymakers, academics, clinicians, anyone whose specialty is not the published paper. And to the point of the infographics as well, infographics are excellent. And in fact, you know, in our full publication, we do recommend, we encourage the additional inclusion of infographics. But the purpose of our recommendation is to create a foundational standard that you know, brings us up to the next level of including PLS, and then, you know, as a standard of including these within the manuscripts, within the systems we currently have, and then considering also including an infographic or a video abstract or a patient perspective.
Okay, am I allowed to jump in? I mean, it's been interesting over, let's take it the last 4 or 5 years. You know, the discussions around PLS have been intriguing, and I know we don't want to go too far down the line of what is a PLS, and you've made a very clear recommendation, but I think anyone watching this should be aware, if they're not already, that there is quite a lot of discussion. There are a number of initiatives, things have happened where it's a little bit, you know, where the definitions do vary. So I think people need to think about that. I think, you know, that the patient side of it, just to pick up on that, and your point, Adeline, I think is very well made. You know, PLS is not about just patients, but patients is a big group. Just out of interest, there have been various suggestions that on the patient side, and let's just say there's a resource here with PLS that can be used for patients. Let's just accept that. You know, and I don't know who would want to answer this, but you know, patient groups and so on can help make access to the information better by providing those PLSs and so on to their audiences. But there has been suggestions, and I don't know the answers. So there's been suggestions, I know, over the last couple of years that, you know, dedicated databases for patients would be built of PLS. I just don't know whether anything's happened on that front, and do you think that would muddy the water, because the basic point is PLS isn't just for patients, or would it help the patients? Because the patient, someone said, you know, how many patients actually go into PubMed and so on. You know, there is a useful resource there. You don't have to limit the resource for PLS by collecting it together and giving it to a particular audience. Does that make sense? Has anyone got a comment on that, or am I talking nonsense?
Yeah, I've got a comment. That would be a great idea to have a database to go to, and like a one point for patient groups to go to, because a lot of patient groups have to actually troll through loads of platforms like PubMed just to get the answer. And then that answer is muddied by like jargon and abbreviations. So one place to go to will be fantastic. So for this.
Okay, Kelly, looks like you want to say something, Kelly.
Yeah, I mentioned repository, and I should have used database, because I completely agree that really would be a huge step forward. Is starting to work toward one location for plain language summaries, even as publishers ourselves, if we can put them together in one place. But I'd really like to see it be more industry-wide, or all publishers working together to aggregate these plain language summaries in a single location, so that they're easily findable, because we've all discussed this many times. And in addition to having them available, they're no use to us if the people that they're, you know, intended for can't find them or can't access them. So finding them and, you know, making them freely available and making them easier to find is a really key part. And I think kind of the next step forward as we move forward with plain language summaries.
And that stating the stupid point, I mean, that whether you're a patient or a GP or just another special, you know, that point is if you can't find it, it's useless, sort of thing. So that, you know, I know there's lots of ways of working on that, but that really is an important part of the puzzle, sort of thing.
Yeah.
What, just out of, oh, sorry, go on.
I just wanted to come to this, it is a great idea to have everything. Basically, the best would be to have one database. Like, let's use, for example, PubMed, right, where you can really scroll. You can basically filter by PLS, right? Meaning that you immediately see what is having a PLS, and you basically do the same. I think that would be the easiest for everyone, right? So you do not need to build another database and verify that you just do this. It is a technical issue. But also coming to all these discussions about you know, and actually, Kelly, coming to you, is that what is very important, I think, is to unify the publishers, or to have somehow a mutual agreement in the publishing end, right? That first, that the publishers are allowing for PLS being part of the paper, right? And not buried somewhere as a supplementary material or something, which is very difficult to find. And I think we all want to have these plain language summaries as a part of the actually accessibility, right? To be open, to be transparent, but easily accessible to everyone who needs it. And it is, and I agree, patient group is extremely important group, but honestly, telling you the truth, I hear so many colleagues are saying, for me, searching in PubMed is so long because I have to go, and they say exactly the same thing what Alan said, you know? So, and even my colleague, the clinician, who is absolutely smart guy, he says, please do so, because then it saves me a lot of trouble, you know, because I know a lot, but I'm not specialist in everything, you know. So, and coming to the age or, you know, type of writing, it should not be really too low, but you know, but like we have having recommendations for the lay language summaries for example, EMA is having the recommendations of FDA for clinical trials, but there are a lot of already ongoing activities, like you have lexicons, right, vocabularies, where is for the plain language. So there is a lot of already in place, right? So we can that is somewhere in between. And coming to probably, I don't know whether you know, I used to work for Vaccine World, and the first book that we published, now it is more than 10 years ago, was actually this translation of a high-tech vaccine language, right? And actually talking to people about what different type of the vaccines there are and why they are and so forth. But it was really for HCPs meant, and a lot of patients, or for vaccines you do not have a lot of patients, but I mean lay public was actually thankful for it, that could understand why you are using which type of, for example, influenza vaccines they are, because before there was influenza pandemic, before COVID, right? So I just want to say that it should not be too low, the language, right? But still understandable to everyone, and it should be accessible. So journals need to align and give the access to those for somehow. Plus, ideally PubMed, for example, and Embase, right?
Come back to some basics. I think I've missed it. I've lost it. There's a question somewhere, I think. But when we're talking about these plain language summaries, and Adeline, you talked about bringing a non-expert in. My immediate thought as you were talking was, well, who defines who that non-expert is, and what level of language do you use? Because because that is quite a wide audience. I understand what Slavka's just said, but how do you practically go about that process of involving the right people and pitching it at the right level from your point of view, like as a medical writer and so on? Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So the level that you're pitching at is obviously going to depend on each individual manuscript. Our recommendations are a description of what it should generally look like, not a prescription, because that's really going to depend on each publication plan, each manuscript, each individual project that you've got going on. So I've totally lost my train of thought there.
You lost your train of thought.
No, don't worry. If I can still be, you're absolutely right. That it depends on the. You are absolutely right. It depends on the topic and so forth. But can I just say my really practical experience on this is that if we collaborate with the authors on our external authors, meaning doctors who are treating patients for our papers, which is most of them are based that we are collaborating with them, or they are authors, right? We always have at least one or two absolutely talented clinicians who know how to talk to patients. So this is to me the first base to discuss with those people, because they use language. Then we, of course, since it is peer reviewed or it is reviewed in the process, you add you have a specialist who write it, by the way, just to let you know. They are a very specific medical writing group who knows how to write this type of in that type of language. So it is basically goes as the paper is developed, it is like discussed, right, together with the paper, right, how to say it the best. And to your point, who should do it? Probably it will be always the best type of the let's say, patients, if you're in a certain therapeutic area, or patient representatives who can read that and to give us the tips how to communicate the best that topic, you know, in that particular paper to the in play language.
Okay.
Did I
okay.
answer it somehow?
I think so, but I guess the truth is there's no one size fits all. I mean, it's that's part of the problem. And again, part of the problem with any sort of discussion like this is there are going to be people who are going, well, that's not precise enough. So let's raise the issues rather than get bogged down in the details. But I think the input to the PLS is obviously very important. And the question which came in from somewhere about, you know, how do you maintain quality control, as it were, of PLS? Again, is that just on a case-by-case basis? And my question to Kelly, I guess, is how much do the publishers get involved in quality control of those PLS? Let's stop with that. I've got a secondary question, but let's just go with that. Okay. Kelly, can you just talk to that for a minute?
Yes, on the publisher side, and this is where peer review training really comes into play, because our peer reviewers need to be able to understand how to evaluate a PLS differently than the manuscript itself, and what language is appropriate, the level. The guidelines that we've published through our author services site give some resources for helping identify appropriate language, what grade level to rate to, things like that. But then our peer reviewers need to also understand that, and that's an initiative we're working on now, is providing guidelines specifically aimed at peer reviewers. And then going back to that, you know, during that revision process, if the authors try to add, you know, those jargony terms back in, it comes down to the editor to also, you know, take the initiative to train themselves to be able to come back and say, no, this isn't the purpose of a plain language summary. This is what we're trying to communicate. This is the audience we're trying to communicate it for. And we've done a recent author survey at Taylor and Francis talking about plain language summaries. And that's where we felt that authors, and some have a lot of support with writing them, other authors don't have a lot of support for writing plain language summaries, and they're not quite sure how to do it, so that they're not doing it at all. And we're getting ready to launch a service where we can help write that plain language summary. So if an author wants to do it, needs help doing it, we can actually provide that service to them. And there'll be more information coming. I just recently had a conversation, and I'm excited about that, because I think as much as it's an initiative on prior to publication to get them written and get them written well, but it's also the onus is on the publishers to help maintain that quality. And again, I like to look at it as fully all publishers, not just Taylor and Francis or one publisher, but the more that we can work as publishers together to do this, the better, because it benefits everyone.
Okay, and sorry, and Kelly, if you're wondering why I'm looking quite so strained, I think the comments coming. Your sound is not brilliant. Okay, so we might all be concentrating a bit when you're talking. Just be aware of that. Okay, you're okay, but it's a little bit strained. So am I right in understanding from what you've said that the same peer review process applies to the PLS? Basically, the same peer reviewers. You don't have specialist peer reviewers who would look at the. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. We want the same peer reviewers to look at the manuscript and at the PLS, and they would look at any materials associated with. There's a video abstract. They're going to look at that transcript. Okay.
And so they're looking at it from a sort of the content point of view, arguably, rather than the presentation of the language sort of thing, although I'm accepting the expertise involved in that. But there's a question here about whether the PLS can be developed later down the line. From your point of view, Kelly, are you sort of assuming that at submission you get the PLS and the enhancements, that all goes through the process? I know different journals work in slightly different ways, but is that your position, Kelly?
We would like to have them have all the materials submitted at the same time, but we welcome post-publication PLS, and we're happy to publish them at any time, because again, we want to encourage them. And sometimes authors just don't have time to develop them before they submit, or have them ready upon submission. So if they want to submit it afterwards, we will, as much as possible, try to locate the same peer reviewers and have them review the plain language summary. But at this date, we certainly welcome them at any time.
Okay, so switch that around. Adeline, I'm going to come to you as a medical writer involved in submitting publications and so on. How does that process work from your side of it?
So I've worked on several different ones. We've had some where we've simply just drafted the plain language summary as we've gone through with the manuscript. So we've had it, during author review, both internal and external, and it's just been there as part of the submission package when we first, send it off to the journal. Also been involved in ones where it's been done post-submission. Either sometimes, journals will allow it within the same article to, add a second piece to it, or as a secondary publication in its own right. So of course, Future Science Group has plain language manuscripts or PLSPs where the primary manuscript was actually published over a year ago or so, and a plain language manuscript has been developed as an article, a standalone article, which has then been submitted as separate to the primary piece.
Okay, so again, no one size fits all. As I'm
Right.
listening to you, I'm sort of in my head, I'm laughing because I had a conversation a few months ago with a medical writer who was just very cross, actually, and no names and all the rest of it. But he basically just was saying, this is ridiculous, that he's working with a particular company. There's an SOP. Every article has to have a PLS, and what they were doing was they were putting a table into the manuscript, which was the PLS, and submitting that, and that was their SOP way of dealing with PLS, but it ticked the box. And of course, most of that was going behind paywall and all this. He just said that this is not the way to deal with it. And again, I just find it interesting. And we were obviously in a transitional sort of stage where weapons, but it seems blindingly obvious that PLS should be, easily discoverable and accessible and all the rest of it, which we're all touching on here. But it's interesting that it hasn't been happening for a long time. But Slavka, can I ask you a straightforward question? At your company, do you just simply go a bit, maybe in a different way, but you go, the PLS is an important part of every manuscript? Is it mandated like that, or is there still discussion about how and when and so on? Does that make sense?
There is no discussion. It is just the way how we go, right? What difficulty we have actually now is that we need to negotiate with journals that we can submit plain language summary, and we get often no. So
Right.
we do prepare it, but or we are ready to prepare it, but we have it. But some journals are just immediately telling us no. If they reject the whole paper, we still have it, and we submit it to another target journal, and we hope to have it published. And so basically, if the idea of having these recommendations that we publish in CMRO was also to start a dialogue with the publishers, so they do come with that we can find a mutual agreement, right? And that we are not going to get no's from journals that we cannot submit the PLS in the first place, right? Because what we typically intend to do is, as you said before, but it was slightly funny format, let's say the table, but that it is part of the development of the paper from the very beginning. So if you talk about QC, it comes on both ends, during the paper development on our end. And then when we submit it, then the journal does their due diligence as well, right? And this way, we have all be on the same page, but we need to have some kind of standards, minimal standards to follow. And, on both ends, right? The journals and also journals requesting and us as developers of the publications, either companies or academics, that we have the same standards that we can follow.
Okay. And we've got a couple of questions. We've got a number of questions coming about. It's all about QC and inconsistencies. Luke saying abstracts, sometimes found to have inconsistencies compared to the article body. This isn't accessible. How do you, again? So it's all about. I mean, there's no easy answer to that. It's just the abstract shouldn't have inconsistencies. That's a QC problem. If you're going to do a PLS, it shouldn't have inconsistencies, etc. It's just maybe saying that it's easier to say that than to do it, sort of thing. What I was. I'm sorry, there are a few questions that I think we're covering the main questions, and we're talking about discoverability, which is important. What I wanted to try and bring in was, we talked in the title of this webinar, but I know you talk about this, and Adeline, I'm going to bring you in to begin with, but you're talking about equity, and this is part of this discussion. Could you just expand on that a little bit and explain a little bit what you're talking about there? What's the equity bit that you're trying to get at there? I think I know the answer, but you tell me.
I mean, it's kind of part of the whole bigger picture, and the key message is that it's, you know, science and information is for everyone, and in fact it's a human right to engage and with scientific information. So if we're gatekeeping it behind jargon and behind paywalls and behind, you know, highly specialized language, we're actually stopping people from engaging with information that they need, that, you know, can benefit everyone. So it's really just about, you know, opening up science to everyone, to patients, to patient advocates, to the public, to policymakers and the media, and bringing everyone into the conversation.
Okay, which makes sense. And I'm going to follow that one slightly, and I'm hoping I'm not going to get this wrong or put you on the spot, Slavka, but open access is at the heart of all of this, by definition. Slavka, Galapagos have mandated that everything should be open access, haven't they? I'm not getting that wrong, am I? So
No.
you as a company do mandate that everything should be open access. Now that in itself is not, I mean, there's a couple of companies, but there's not many companies like yours there. But that, again, for me, it's always seemed a very sensible way of going forward. I know there's a business there and they have to work out the business, but, you know, open access is at the heart of all of this. Kelly, it looks like you want to say something though. Go on.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just to touch back on something I said earlier is that right now we make sure that any PLS that's published is in front of the paywall, no matter if the article is or not. But I also feel that we should take it one step further and make all PLS open access under a CC BY license. And a CC BY license basically is the least restrictive of the open access licenses, and it allows it to be freely shared as much as possible, reused. And I think that's what we want to encourage. I think publishers, we should align on that, because that otherwise we're defeating the purpose of having this plain language summary available and trying to reach a wide audience.
Exactly. Alan, have you got a comment on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with the comments. Yeah. You know, running a small rare disease charity, when you discover that a PLS or any document is hidden behind a paywall, it's just not on. You know, for a patient to research their own condition, they shouldn't be restricted to, you know, in getting that information and having to pay good money that's been fundraised just to get information about that condition. I think that goes across the board. But yeah, you shouldn't have to pay to get your information.
Yeah, you are absolutely right, Alan. And I don't want to deviate and go now to open access and why we, for example, have this policy. And I was also part of Shire when we basically, even we were the first company launching that initiative, right, as a company. But the idea is that the PLS should be basically, as you say, publicly available, right? And ideally, and I saw some comments on Q&A, is ideally and especially for for the research sponsored by the company, you know, we cannot go and start to so-called like promote our papers or plain language summaries, because it is not ethical, right? So if we would really, on the next step, it would be great if journals themselves are spreading those around, right? Because we as a companies, for-profit organizations, it is basically not possible for us to do so, right? To, in a sense, so-called promote or discuss about our papers, right? So for us, the PLSs are important because patients are important, you know, and we see it all the time. You know, we have so many initiatives to engage with patients, and then the main stream, like a communication on what we actually, the research that we publish, right? There, if there we see these barriers, it is actually very frustrating for us. Not only from open access perspective, but also for, like, you see the patients need it, and we cannot always give them, you know, the papers, because then there is another legal stuff. You need to give them the, you know, you need to trace everything. It is actually not correct for the people to get some kind. It's called the transfer of value, so it is just very complicated legal stuff. So we really want to have open access to keep transparency.
Okay. Adeline, I need to wrap this up around about now, or we're going to keep talking all afternoon. So Adeline, I'd like to come back to you as sort of, as the Open Pharma representative here, and these are your, the recommendations of this group and so on. Do you want to just finish off with a sort of like closing remark in terms of the recording, and then members of the audience, you don't have to rush away. We'll be here for another 10 minutes. But Adeline, just to sort of close this bit from a recording point of view, have you got a couple of comments to share there?
Yeah, I think one thing I should have clarified at the beginning is that when we say minimum standards, we don't mean don't go on and do more, bring in a more specific target audience or increase understanding and engagement with more enhanced materials. What we want is we want to see everyone meeting this, like bringing everyone up to a level playing field with this minimum, and then from there go on to do more and to bring more people into the conversation. Okay.
And for more information about Open Pharma, let's just give you the quick plug. openpharma.blog, isn't it, that you
openpharma.blog? Yeah, _ Open Pharma on Twitter. We're also on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Okay, so if people want to get part of that conversation, they can follow what you're up to. They can certainly access these recommendations via Open Pharma. And just as a wrap up, guys, I know I'm speaking for you, but I know you'll all agree with me, to members of the audience, anyone watching the video, you'd all love to hear from people. If they contact you, LinkedIn is an easy way, or Alan, I know you're not on LinkedIn, so you've got a website about Ataxia and Me. So please, all I really want to do is say to anyone watching this, the whole part of the point of these exercises is to connect you all. So please, if you're watching this and you want to follow up, then please follow up directly. Everyone's very happy to hear from you. Yeah. Okay. Cool. If you want my little plug, if you want to know what we're doing, medcommsnetworking.com. If you want to watch these sorts of videos, NetworkPharma TV. This recording will be on NetworkPharma TV, or being well later on. And I'm always very happy to hear from anybody who's doing anything in and around this business. So in these very strange and uncertain times, I'm going to say goodbye and stay well. I'm going to ask the panelists just to give us a little wave as we stop the recording, please. So bye-bye, take care, bye.